The wheat rose from soil the color of pewter, whispering in the wind like beads of glass rattling in a jar. Anyone who had worked ordinary fields could see how wrong it looked. The stalks were too straight, spines gleaming with a faint chartreuse halo, even under a moonless sky, and the kernels glowed if you cracked one open after sundown. Yet the village of Ozen, hemmed in by crater lakes and forgotten watchtowers, had little else to eat. When people speak of miracles, they often mean a reprieve from hunger. The day the first loaf of the strange wheat was sliced, the scent of nut and smoke drifted over the square, and the mayor declared that perhaps the earth had simply healed itself in its mutative way. The bread was dense, a dark gold shot through with emerald flecks. The first crumbs melted on the tongue like warm honey. That same night, the baker's apprentice awoke screaming, describing the next morning's rainstorm with uncanny precision, how it would start as a mist, thicken into torrents, and drive the river to burst its banks at exactly the bell's second toll. When the prophecy unfolded word for word, the village consecrated the field and named the loaf Panem Sideris, star bread. 3 months later, when I arrived in Osen, one could spot the regular devotees by their fingertips. The tips were ashen, stiff as chalk. They could not fully bend their second knuckles. Still, they lined up outside the bakery every third night, clutching tin tokens they traded for a single slice. The baker, Daniel Gaiut, counted tokens like a priest measuring sins, and his ledger was an atlas of desperation. Who needed a vision most? Whose body could still sacrifice another fraction of its softness? I came because the capital's scholars had read rumors in the smuggled letters. Stone-walled houses in shattered provinces, farmers foretelling eclipses, and always, a new affliction that hardened flesh grain by grain. The ministry dispatched 3 of us. 2 turned back after their carriage horses began losing patches of hair under the harsh light in the valley. I kept on. Curiosity has its own gravity, and mine dragged me through the gates of Osen with a satchel of instruments, a notebook, and a naive promise to observe, not interfere. The first thing I recorded was the silence around conversations of cost. It is rude to speak of your slow ossification when the rest of the town accepts it as holy debt. What matters, after all, is the vision, a 2-minute ecstasy that delivers knowledge no oracle ever managed without riddles. The afflicted describe it as standing on the highest rung of reality's ladder, looking down on time like a sleeping animal. They see threads, branching choices, deaths prevented, fortunes secured. Why would anyone refuse that, knowing tomorrow's thinking might be carved in stone? But so might tomorrow's misery be avoided. I sought out Daniel in his shop the second evening. He was kneading dough whose surface shimmered as though someone had mixed in powdered glass. His forearms were mostly marble, tiny fractures mapping the veins that once carried blood. He worked methodically, smiling whenever his wooden thumb knocked the side of the bowl. "You've come to warn us," he guessed, before I could speak. His voice sounded brittle, like someone walking on frozen leaves. "I've come to measure," I corrected. "And to understand?" Daniel laughed. "Understanding is the first slice," he said, cutting the dough with a marble knife that must once have been his own hand. "You won't resist. None of us do." He was wrong, I told myself. I would observe, document, return to the ministry, and argue for quarantine. Yet every time the oven's paddle scraped the hearth, an aroma filled my lungs with yearning. It reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen the winter she saved us from famine by baking crusts of grass and sawdust. That memory wrapped itself around each breath until on the 5th night, I traded a silver pen for one thin heel. They warned me to eat in solitude. The vision, they said, should not be diluted by the chatter of others. I carried the bread to the loft above the inn. Moonlight cut a bar across the floorboards. I sat where the slash of light met my shadow. The loaf was warm. Steam rose in twisting spirals. I swallowed. It happened between heartbeats. One instant I stared at cracked plaster. The next, everything split open like theaters lit simultaneously. I saw Osen 30 years forward, the fields completely ash, the people gone, their statues leaning over abandoned fountains. I saw myself in a corridor of brass, arguing with faceless ministers about something called the Petrifex Treaty. I saw a child, my child, placing a pebble on a grave whose inscription flaked away each time I tried to read it. Above it all hung a lattice of light, threads turning as if wound by invisible gears, and I understood how to tug a single thread to alter a life. Then I felt it, a cold buzzing in my tongue. I rushed to the mirror and watched the tip pale from pink to gray, the color of morning frost. Sensation dulled. When I tapped it with a fingernail, it clicked like porcelain. Panic roared inside me, but with it came a calm voice that wasn't quite mine. You bargained, and the bargain was kept. The next day I told no one what I had seen. I told everyone what they wanted to hear, that the visions were mild, the cost negligible. I lied because I was already tracing possibilities, the way an architect sketches arches before foundations. If Osen's downfall was certain, perhaps that future arose because someone chose to shutter the bakery. Perhaps preserving it a little longer, while regulating the dose, could save hundreds. The lattice had shown me forks in the road, not closed gates, so I stayed. Weeks slid by under crisp autumn suns. Each vision taught me how to nudge events. I advised the miller to reinforce the east wall before the storm I knew would strike. No grain was lost. I convinced the midwife to carry scissors of bronze instead of iron on a night when iron would have sparked a cottage fire. People began calling me the scribe of certainties, and I let them. Yet my body betrayed the upgrades my mind harvested. Stone crept past the tongue, along the jawline. I could no longer whistle. My left ear petrified, and with it went half my hearing. I observed it clinically, noting that the rate accelerated after each loaf, but writing that observation did nothing to slow it. Daniel grew harder too. His ribs no longer expanded fully. He breathed as though through cracks. Still, he baked, because the village's demands grew with every calamity averted. Curiously, the field never diminished. Scything the radioactive wheat only seemed to provoke more. The stalks rose overnight, more luminous, like they were fed by the villagers' certainty. I wrote to the ministry, urging them to send shielding equipment, geologists, physicians versed in rad toxicity. My letters went unanswered. The capital enjoyed its visions now, smuggled in rings of brittle crust. Diplomats found the bread invaluable for treaty negotiations, generals for campaigns, poets for inspiration. A quiet, ravenous trade blossomed. Osen received crates of coin, tools, even stained glass windows for their church, all in exchange for a harvest nobody dared touch without gloves, and the statues multiplied. The first complete statue had been the shepherd Talon, who consumed a whole loaf to predict the birth hour of his wife's twins. 3 days later, as he sang to the newborns, calcification locked his lungs. They found him seated on a stool, forever leaning forward, mouth open in lullaby. The stone lamb he once carved as a hobby now kept him company on the porch, 2 artworks equally mute. The villagers carried him to a shrine beside the bakery. Neither burial nor display, but something of both. More shrines followed. The greenish stone bodies lined the main road, each clutching a tablet inscribed with the prophecy that had cost it breath. The line snaked toward the field like pilgrims returning home. I told myself these were memorials, but the truth gnawed. They were warnings. We paraded past them daily, and still we ate. 3 seasons later, my chest was a cage of granite. I could not cough without tasting dust, but my visions had grown keener. I saw ripples centuries ahead, civilizations balanced on our wheat like dancers atop sparking wire. The bread would spread, so said the lattice, infecting empires with glimpses of perfection and payment in flesh. Humanity might become a planet of statues, dreaming impossible dreams, unless I tugged the correct thread. That thread was Daniel. One wintry dusk I visited him in the bakery's back room. A single ember glowed in the oven, yet sweat glistened on his forehead. Not sweat, I realized, but condensation on marble, like dew slicking a tomb at dawn. He was polishing loaves with butter, sealing them in waxy cloth for export. "Stop," I said, or tried to say. My stony voice grated. It took several efforts before he understood words from my half-locked jaw. He set down the brush. "You, of all people, ask me to stop." He laughed, and tiny chips broke from the corners of his lips. "You've guided half this land, thanks to what I bake." "We're killing the world," I signed, mixing speech with gestures since articulation failed. Visions spread faster than warning. Daniel's eyes grayed weeks earlier, but they still found mine. Knowledge always demanded flesh. Scribes once cut reed from marshes, and malaria swallowed them. Miners dug radium, their bones lit from within. This is simply a purer price. Too pure, I argued. I told him of the empire of statues. I told him of the lattice unraveling as threads snapped. I told him I had seen his own future. A monument toppled by frost, head shattered on cobblestones, his name lost. He listened, yet his hands kept shaping dough. "If you want it to end," he murmured, "burn the field." We both turned toward the distant window where the wheat glowed faintly, a constellation rooted in earth. Burn the field. Such an idea had flickered in every eater's mind, extinguished quickly by the need for another bite of certainty. I left him and walked among the shrines. Moonlight laminated the statues in silver. I ran rigid fingers across their cheeks, remembering who they were. Talon the shepherd, Mira the potter, Osric the teacher. They had eaten to help others. They had eaten believing someone stronger would prevent the escalation they themselves could not. The wind carried a hushed hiss from the field, like thousands of matches flicking. I knew then the wheat spoke, not with words but invitation. Come, harvest, see. I considered waiting for permission from a council that would never grant it. I considered writing another urgent letter. Instead, I fetched the single copper lantern kept in the inn stable, filled it with lamp oil, and set off down the dirt track. My limbs were heavy, but stone lends endurance. Each step thudded like sculptor's mallet against block. At the field's edge I paused. Threads of pale luminescence curled above the heads of grain, as if their radiation drew cosmic dust. Up close, I smelled ozone, cinnamon, something like molten coin. I forced my stiff neck to bow, inhaling the last perfume deeply. I swung the lantern by its handle 3 times, then hurled it into the center. It burst, splashing oil across bells of seed. The fire whooshed upward, green and white and blue, an aurora pinned to soil. Heat slapped me, yet I felt little. Nerves calcified weeks earlier. The wheat screamed in frequencies that shook my rigid sternum. Sparks spiraled skyward, like the souls of every prophecy loosed at once. I staggered back, watching futures ricochet inside my mind, collapsing possibilities like dominoes toppling toward daybreak. In some, the flames died too soon. In others, the blaze grew so hot that glass planes replaced ozone. I hunted for the thread where destruction sufficed to end the harvest without erasing the village. There, a gust would rise in 12 heartbeats from the river gorge, bend the fire eastward, away from the houses, but enough to char every stalk. I could not summon wind, but I could signal. I groped for the bell rope at the watchtower beside the field, fingers cracking as they curled. 2 jerks sounded an old alarm meant for bandits. Metal clanged, echoing across rooftops. The air shuddered. Villagers thrust open shutters. At the same instant, the lattice shone behind my eyelids, showing the gust reading my call like a cue. It swept in, a cold arm of river air, and flames danced to its command, bowing east. The wheat folded, embers popping. Radiant seeds cracked, releasing sparks that fizzled on charred stems. Smoke rolled past me, painting my marble skin soot black. By dawn, nothing remained but a field of obsidian stumps. The glow was gone. The bread was gone. The visions stilled. Ash blanketed Osen like gray snow. People gathered, staring over my shoulder at the ruin. Some wept, others breathed relief so deep it whistled in their throats. Daniel approached, slow, each footfall chipping shards off his ankles. He stopped beside me. "You made the choice," he said, voice hollow. "We made it," I answered, though speaking felt like grinding millstones behind my teeth. "I struck the match, but everyone who stayed idle these months struck it long before." He gazed at the horizon, where a falling sun tinted the smoke rose gold. "The hunger for certainty never dies," he warned. "If a single grain survived—" "It didn't," I assured, recalling the lattice's silence. For the first time since my first bite, the world seemed undecided, alive with doubt. Weeks passed while men plowed the poisoned ground under layers of imported soil. The statues remained, a colonnade of memory. Some thought to smash them for gravel. Most agreed they should stand, reminders of the deal we'd voided too late for them. My own transformation halted. Stone did not recede, but it spread no farther. I was a hybrid creature. Chest and jaw marble, eyes still soft and moist. I could write. I could walk. I could not taste or sing, but I no longer craved either. Instead, I recorded what had been done, how power and ruin courted each other in a loaf. Letters from the capital accused Osen of sabotage. Officials demanded restitution for prophetic services now lost. They threatened battalions. The villagers sent back a single crate. Inside, fragments of charred wheat and a note in my unsteady hand. "Let the future grow without chains." The battalions never came. Perhaps the generals feared wars fought blind. Perhaps they feared statues. Or perhaps, visionless now, they simply could not decide. In early spring, shoots of ordinary barley sprouted where the star wheat had died. Children ran through the green rows without their skin glowing. I sat on the porch of the bakery, now shuttered, and watched them. Daniel, more sculpture than man, rested in a chair beside me. He did not move except when wind toppled him one afternoon and villagers propped him up again. "Do you regret it?" someone asked me on the solstice. "Regret implies certainty about what should have happened," I said, the words slow but clear. "We live in uncertainty now. That is how life moves." They nodded, but I sensed their unease. People still dream of knowing tomorrow's dice throw. Maybe someday a miner in a distant hill will unearth a seed that escaped the blaze, its coat blackened, but its core intact. Maybe someone will plant it, and the cycle will begin again. Yet memory, like a field, can be sown with caution. It can grow vigilance. I touch my stone tongue against stone teeth each dawn and remember the price of prophecy. I remember the statues humming at night, their stories rustling through cracks like wind and broken flutes. They stand at the village edge, witness and warning. Travelers pause before them, running flesh fingers over cold prophecy. Some flinch, some linger. All move on unsated, for no bread waits here. And in that hunger, in that open, echoing doubt, I hear the true gift the wheat could never grant. The future, unwritten, pliant as dough in mortal hands.